and welcome to Kate Anjou's Book Reviews, the place where we shine a spotlight on indie books and their authors. And with me today, I'm delighted to announce that we have Catherine Ferns. Hey! And we're going to be talking about her book, All the Parts of the Soul. So hi, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me. I've had a bit of a cough and a cold, so if I have a croaky voice, I apologize. I'll try and make it a sexy voice, right?
100%. It's like, you know, that episode of Friends where Phoebe gets the flu and then she's got this real like husky voice.
Yeah, exactly. And then she goes into this horrific coughing fit. So I'll probably
that's what I'll edit it. Yeah, it's cool. No, absolutely. Husky and sexy. That's all we're going for here. No, yeah, if you need to take a break or have a drink or anything, by all means. Cool. So I always sort of begin these proceedings with just asking my guests to just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your book. So yeah, go ahead.
So I'm Catherine Ferns. I am an author from Liverpool, but I live in Geneva, Switzerland. I've lived here for about 7 years. I started writing relatively late, I guess, in my late 30s, after having all my kids and changing career several times and traveling a lot for my husband's work. I kind of was trying to find something that would fit in with being a stay-at-home mum, and writing is perfect because you can do it anywhere, you can pick it up and put it down. And it also coincided with a sort of creative explosion that happened to me when I had my kids. I never thought of myself as a creative person, but I suddenly got the urge to make music and to write books. And so I just started writing, and before I knew it, I had my first book. So I wrote a crime fiction series, which is published by Unorthodox Press. That's set in Liverpool. And then I wrote my historical novel, All the Parts of the Soul, which is out now with Quill and Crow. Yeah, there it is. And I have another book coming out with Quill and Crow next year. And I'm writing the one after that right now. So I'm always writing.
Wow.
But I'm really happy with All the Parts of the Soul. It was a risky book to write and to publish. It tells a very controversial story, and it's been out since the end of October, and I'm really happy with the reviews and the way that people are getting what I was trying to do with it. So yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Oh, excellent. That's amazing as well that, you know, like you had this spurt of inspiration and you really did something with it, you know, like not only are you writing, you're creating music. That's really inspiring. That's fantastic. I think it can be, I mean, I'm a parent, and it can be very easy to sort of lose that side of yourself once you become a parent, because you have so many other priorities in place. And the fact that you've been able to harness those inspirations and, you know, have that creative flow, I think is fantastic. I didn't start podcasting until after I had my kid and stuff, and it's one of those things, I think it's almost maybe like because you have that thing of, you know, you've got so many things going on, it's like you kind of want to do something a little bit for yourself, isn't it? Like, I don't know if that was for you, but that was certainly what it was like for me.
I think so, yeah. And I think women get to a point where you know, whether they're mothers or not, women get to a point where we want to spread our wings and express ourselves. And yeah, my creative side definitely came out, and it's unstoppable now.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited for your new projects. And it's like, yeah,
lots happening.
Yeah, I'm gutted it's going to be not until next year. As you can probably tell from that, I very much enjoyed All the Parts of the Soul. Like, it was we sort of had a bit of a chat about it off air, but it was such an emotional book for me. Like, I literally went through a plethora of different responses. There were some moments where I was like that like really touched me on like an emotional level, and then like in a nice way, and then there were other times where I just wanted to hurl the book across the room because I was just so infuriated by some of the mindsets and the logic being applied with these characters. And I really very much feel like that is the point of the book, is to really put yourself in that mindset, so of like what it was like at the time. So, you know, what we're talking about here is a book about the witchcraft trials set in Geneva, where you live, during the 1500s, during the Reformation, within the church. And we follow the character of Henry Aubert. That's pronounced right, is it? Aubert? Yep. Someone whose name is Anjou, a French name that is constantly mispronounced. I always try and make sure, like, at least my French names are on point. But yeah, Henry Aubert, so he's a magistrate, and he gets hired to go to this village where there's been suspicions of witchcraft, and not only just one or two, but the whole village is rampant with it. And he goes there and he finds his own sets of challenges, and his own sort of like internal moral compass being swayed one way or the other. And I just think it's just such an interesting book. And although it's a book that is set, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, there are still so many themes within this book that I feel like are very, very relevant today. Is that part of like the inspiration that you had with certain things that have been happening lately with women's rights and human rights in general?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think so. I probably didn't realize it at the time, but a lot of people in the reviews have said that this is a book that's filled with feminist rage and makes a lot of points about today. And yeah, I think I was angry when I was writing it. I came at it very much as a historian. I wanted to write about the Reformation. I wanted to write about Geneva during the 16th century and about Calvinism and about witchcraft and plague. But I was definitely looking through the lens of, I guess a feminist lens, because I wrote it in 2018. So it was before the pandemic and after the Me Too.
I was going to say that's right in the Me Too movement.
And so in a way, everyone has become much more aware of some of the problems that women face, but at the same time there was kind of a backlash happening. You had the rise of these sort of anti-feminist movements. You had these awful YouTubers. My own sons were starting to make jokes about women, driving in the kitchen and watching these awful YouTubers very briefly before they realized. But I was seeing a backlash, and then of course we had these terrible changes in the laws in America and in some European countries where women's rights are being taken away. It was very much a sort of Handmaid's Tale thing happening in several countries around the world, and it did feel like women were still being scapegoated in quite similar ways to the 16th century. And so I didn't really have that prominent in my mind, but I think that there was quite a lot of female anger behind.
Like in the background, like on a subconscious level, maybe.
And I mean, I'm very happy with the way history has been moving in the past few years, in the sense that women are being written back into history. And I've learned so much from my daughters, because I actually did a degree in history, but it was 25 years ago now. And I'm learning so much from my daughter's history books, because there are all these new books for teenage girls. There's a series called Bedtime Stories for Rebel Girls, and it's about...
I have that. Yeah, I have that book.
Amazing. And, some of these women, I'd never even heard of them. And when you read what they actually did, it's insane that they weren't in the history books before. And so that is fantastic. And then there are lots of fiction books coming out about witches. It's a kind of subgenre of its own right now, which again is amazing, but it's much more fashionable and palatable, let's say, to write from the perspective of the women. And that's how it should be, because we need to hear voices that had previously been silenced. But I decided not to do that. I decided to write from the perspective of a witch hunter. I wanted to get into the mind of a misogynist, because I wanted to understand it. I think understanding doesn't mean sympathizing. I very much wanted to understand where a misogynist is coming from, because I think we can't really tackle it unless we understand it. Certainly misogyny has affected my life 500 years later. So I wanted to get into the mind of a misogynist, which took me to a very dark place. And I think some readers have struggled with it, and that was the point. I was challenging myself, and I wanted to challenge readers as well, because we do see something of ourselves in him. We're all capable of following a crowd. We're all capable of making bad choices. We're not all capable of what he does. We're not all misogynist. But I wanted to get into his head, and I wanted to get into the head of a 16th century witch hunter misogynist, because it meant something different then, at a time where people maybe did actually believe in witches. So I wanted to ask, what does hypocrisy mean at a time when maybe people did think witches were real or not? I personally don't think Calvin believed in witches. I think he used it as a tool to control people.
Yeah,
Some people did. Some people did believe in it. What does that mean for hypocrisy? And it was also a time when the Reformation meant that people were being made to change their beliefs, and it was a matter of, their soul. It was a matter of what happened to them.
People were terrified back then.
What they believed. Did they really change their beliefs, or did they keep it a secret? So I wanted to explore all of that through the mind of a witch hunter.
I think that's so interesting, and that you've gone ahead and answered a couple of my questions already. And interview's done. Bye. No, I think it's so interesting, the fact that you took that stance, and I mean, this is all of the books that I've covered in this show so far have been about witches one way or other. They're all very, very different books, but witches have been at the core, and this is the first one where it's from a male perspective. And my first interview was with another Quill and Crow author called Stephen Black, and we were discussing The Famine Witch, and there are multiple characters, female characters, which are written in a first person narrative and things, and it's I was praising him for his ability to get in the mind of a female character, and it not be tropey, and it not be stereotypical, and be very authentic. And I can't speak for whether Henry has been written authentically. I'm not a man. I can't speak for that experience, but when I was reading it, coming across it did come across as authentic for the time, for the mindsets that you were speaking of, this constant upheaval, this being pulled left and right between old Catholicism, Protestants, and this whole reform of your religious beliefs. And religion, especially back then, is just such a core part of who people are if you have it, and being told that actually no, all of that's wrong, and then coming back. And for someone like Henry, who he's got OCD, he's got a lot of deep-seated issues with his psychology and trauma that he experienced, and abandonment issues that he's experienced when he was very young, and that all coming together in this time frame. I think that understanding where his mindset comes from, and the reasons behind his actions, whilst they're abhorrent, and I don't approve of them at all, I think that there is a really great understanding that comes from reading this book as to how someone can get to that place mentally, and those belief structures, which to us just seems so ridiculous and alien. Unfortunately, there are still some people who harbor shadows of those kinds of things. But I think you did an incredible job of that. And I obviously, as you say, you're a historian, and you live in Geneva. So I mean, how much research did you have to do for this book? Did you already have quite a great knowledge of this, and it was just a case of putting your ideas down on paper, or did you have to go into additional research and work out because a lot of this, although Henry and I believe Louise isn't a real person, but she's probably based on
Henry and Louise are based on real people, but they're fictional characters. Most of the other main characters are real people.
So obviously, getting those things right, and getting the timelines and all of those things right. I mean, how much of that did you have to research?
I did a lot of research. I already had a good knowledge of that time period, because it's something that I specialized in my degree, and I kept my interest since then. So I had read all of the, the core texts, and yeah, I had a good basic knowledge. And then living in Geneva, I had such easy access to all the locations and to the city archives and the libraries. And then I just read so much stuff. I love research. It's my favorite part. So yeah, I went really, really into it, and I sort of did the research in layers, which is what I do with all my books. Actually, I sort of do a big load of research, and then I start writing, and that informs what I still need to research. So then I do a second lot and a third lot. And it's my first historical novel, so I didn't know how I would find getting into the voice, because there's nothing worse than a really sort of cheesy, fake, medieval.
Or like there being like this real kind of consistently like, medieval dialect, and then all of a sudden something really modern's thrown in. You're just kind of like,
exactly. I think that put me off for a long time writing a historical novel, but I found that the voice, both my narrative voice and the voices of the characters, came very naturally. And I found that I wasn't writing cheesily, but I wasn't writing in any particular style. It was coming. And I think that's because of the research. And whenever there was a sentence that grated, it was because I hadn't researched that properly.
right.
I think with historical dialogue, you can't speak exactly the way they spoke. So, for example, I had access to, for Calvin, his dialogue was so easy because he wrote so much and made so many speeches that were transcribed. So I almost had everything he had ever said already written down. But of course, if I actually wrote that in a book, it would sound ridiculous. So sort of modernize it is the wrong word, but I don't know what other historical writers would say, but I found that it came quite naturally. So the voice was easier than I thought. But yeah, that was based on a huge amount of research. And even at the very last edit, we're picking little anachronisms that I'd made. So yeah, it's a painstaking process, but it's very enjoyable to build this world and to try and get it right.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great that you have so much around you, like this plethora of information and being, and when it comes even things like just being able to describe certain like settings and backdrops and things like that's going to be like really accurate because you have it's right there for you. And like with that, obviously where you are a historian, is that something that, do you feel like you would have maybe, especially with that being your speciality subject, is that something that you would have maybe got through in your own time, or is that something like that you just did for the story, or do you think you would have like probably gone through that history as well anyway, like just for funsies?
Yeah, I think I've lived in a lot of different places, and the way I get to know a place is and the way I feel that I belong to a place is by walking around and just getting to know everything about it. And when I moved to Geneva, I spent a lot of time wandering about. When I moved here, my youngest was only a baby, so I would take her in a sling or in a pram, and we just went through all of the streets of Geneva, just getting to know the place, and just sort of falling in love with it, really, and getting to know the history. And one thing that really struck me was how Calvin is still the figurehead of Geneva. You see him everywhere you go. Statues of him. He's on the big Reformation wall. He's on the stamps. He's on the beer. So all of
really
of Calvin in them. And as well as being an image of the city, there's something about the Calvinist spirit that has really stood the test of time in Swiss culture, and it's something that I really wanted to explore. So I got really into the Swiss Reformation and what happened in Geneva. So yeah, I think I would have become a bit obsessed with that anyway. And
so
also
a good outlet for you.
I think so. And interestingly, I like I said, I wrote this before COVID, just before actually. But my route into the story was through plague, because it's really random, but I was walking through the old town of the city and I got obsessed with these huge door knockers. Um, they have these really
It's such a recurring thing in the book.
Yeah,
That's
it's
why I'm
going.
laughing.
It's going somewhere. It's going somewhere.
Mhm.
They have these huge iron door knockers. And I got really into them, and I took loads of photos of them, and I started researching them. And that led me to this bizarre phenomenon that happened in the 16th century of plague spreading. And no one really knows if it was a myth or reality, but people became afraid of their neighbors spreading plague on their door handles. So the rumor was that people would get hold of rotting limbs from the plague cemetery and they would paste it onto their neighbors' door handles to give them the plague. Why? Either because they were witches, which was why lots of people got executed for witchcraft, or because they wanted them to die so they could go in and steal their stuff, or because they wanted to get paid for being the plague workers who buried the dead. No one really knows if it happened at all or if it was just, neighborhood rumor. But I became fascinated with this phenomenon of plague spreading and how it became conflated with witchcraft. And hundreds of people were executed, actually thousands over a period of a decade for this phenomenon of plague spreading, and most of them because they were accused of being witches. So that's how I got into the witchcraft story. So yeah,
Yeah,
got
it's
hundreds of pictures of door handles.
oh, I bet that I'd like the proper old like brass iron knee type.
Exactly, with like a lion, and it's in the lion
Yeah,
sort of thing.
yeah. You see, I mean, you kind of do. You see them sort of like in Bath and London, don't you? Like and
Exactly.
stuff. But like, I didn't. I never. Because yeah, plague spreading was like the first instance that I'd sort of come across that in your book. This sort of idea that people were purposely spreading the plague for their own whatever reason, and it's a real fascinating one because the way that you write about it is very tied in with witchcraft, and it's almost like two sides of the same coin. Like, oh, if you're a witch, then you probably are a plague spreader. If you're a plague spreader, you're definitely a witch, kind of thing. And I was going to ask you about it because obviously, I imagine, given when the book was released, that you probably were writing it during COVID and everything, and I was wondering whether that was like an inspiration. But you started it before COVID, and it was just a coincidence.
It was a strange coincidence, and then it was interesting to compare the way that the Geneva of the 21st century coped with a pandemic and the way they coped in the 16th century. And I mean, that's for many PhDs to be written, but it's fascinating that we were self-isolating and we were covering our faces and we were not touching door handles.
The elbow thing, greeting.
Exactly. But it was this and the curfews and the lockdowns, and people living in fear. And I think when people are afraid, they can be easily manipulated into believing crazy things, and that's why a lot of people were accused of witchcraft. I mean, that wasn't the only reason, and of course, it's very well known why so many women were accused of witchcraft. But plague was one of the things that was happening at that time.
It certainly seemed to be an added attribute to why people were so on edge as well, like even more so. And no, definitely I can certainly see that, especially having lived through essentially a plague, and or it's and seeing how people change and how trust just goes out of the window. And it is a very strange psychology, and absolutely for PhD other people to write about. I'm certainly not gonna get into it, but like I thought it was a really interesting sort of parallel, those two running alongside each other.
Even the issue of vaccinations comes into the book, which is a very weird coincidence. I didn't want to make too much of it, but it was part of the point I wanted to make about women being written out of history. Because I don't know if you remember, but at the end, I can't say too much. No, I can't say too much about that. But the point is,
I don't want to spoiler.
But the point is that Louise, is basic. I mean, she's a midwife and a healer, and she's basically a doctor. I mean, she was trained by Paracelsus when she was a nun, and he was one of the first proponents of a very rudimentary form of vaccine. And one of the reasons she got accused of witchcraft in the book was that she had been reading materials he'd written about a very basic form of inoculation where you would expose someone to a very tiny amount of plague. So he was the first person to start the idea of vaccinations. And because she had been reading his scientific papers, that was one of the things the authorities jumped on and said, this is heresy, so it's witchcraft.
Exactly.
But the fact that, I mean, logically and objectively, Louise was the doctor and the scientist and the expert, but somehow it was these silly men in the crazy beak masks who were poking her and humiliating her. They were the ones who were the supposed experts. So yeah. I mean, the hypocrisy was just beyond staggering, and we have plenty of staggering hypocrisy today. So
yeah, it's very very on point for certain things happening in certain parts of certain countries right now. And which will name this, so as not to offend anyone, I guess.
Indeed.
But yeah, I mean, the character of Louise, I think she's such an interesting character, and she's sort of our counterpart to Henry. Like, she's our other sort of main character. If you typically have a male lead character and a female lead character, she's our female. And yeah, she is a very relatable character, especially from like a woman reading, because she is the voice of reason. She thinks about things pragmatically. She uses logic to get from A to B to C, as opposed to rumors or assumptions or anything like that. And she, I don't know, I imagine that, especially from what you've sort of said earlier, she's very representative of sort of your feelings towards it, because she sees Henry as a whole person. She doesn't just see him as one thing or the other. She sees the complexities within him and the sort of the moral battles that he fights within himself, and she just implores him to try and see reason, and tells him, hey, actually, maybe she's not a witch. Actually, maybe it's this, or maybe or what would you do if you were under duress? Like, wouldn't you do, and she very much has this like frustration with the situation, and she sees it very much for what it is. And I really think that she is such a well-written, great character, someone who I very much like. If I'm going to relate to anyone in this book, it's going to be her. And it was a really interesting sort of dynamic between these two, someone who is so archaic and misogynistic with someone who is so forward thinking. And without going into it too much, like their relationship, for lack of a better term, given that we have it all from his perspective and it's a fairly warped perspective at times, it's a very interesting dance that these two sort of do. How important was that for you to, like, was that something that you did on a conscious level, to have someone who was there to kind of question Henry kind of on his level, like, even if he sort of thinks her a bit of a woman or whatever, he does have a respect for her in a very twisted way. How important was that for you to have that kind of counterpart there?
Yeah, like you said, she often voices thoughts that are going through Henry's head, and she tries to guide him towards making the right decision, because she humanizes him. And that was important to do, because if I just made him into a monster, then it wouldn't have been the same book, because it would have been too simplistic. Because the fact is that tens of thousands of women, not just women, but mostly women, were executed in horrible ways for ridiculous reasons. These things did happen, and there weren't. It's not like every single man in Europe was a monster. I mean, these were normal people, real people making these decisions. So it's important to understand how they got to them without condoning even the slightest thing that he did. So it was important to show that he was a human who had choices. He had moral choices to make, and things could have gone differently. And certainly, a couple of publishers that my agent pitched this to at the beginning wanted me to change the ending, and I
Oh, really? Oh, I don't want to talk too much about it.
no, we
one of those moments where I wanted to hold my book without going into it too much.
Yeah.
I don't want to say either which way, but like there are some things that happen where I'm just like,
yeah, it could have gone differently, and there were many moments when it could have gone differently. And Louise wasn't the only voice of reason. Actually, there was also
Bernard as well.
Yeah, there was also Bernard. Who also tried to befriend Henry and gave him chances. And then he also shows himself to have certain weaknesses in the end.
But we're human.
Not to give spoilers.
Yeah, it's tricky, but we are human though, and that's the thing I think works really well here, is that even if you have these sort of monstrous type characters or people who do monstrous things for whatever reason that they think is just, like they are complex, they are human, they have vulnerabilities, they're not just one thing or another. And yeah, I think like I mean, I always have this thing whenever I read something or watch something, like I have to care about the characters in some way. If you are just either boring or just completely unrelatable, I will lose interest like that. I'm like, I need something, like if we're following this character, I need to care, I need to give a shit. And although everything that he did basically like appalled me, because we have this backstory, because we have these moments of potential redemption or potential like, hey, you can do something different, you don't have to, that's what really kept me interested with him as a character, is seeing the decisions that he makes and seeing his reasoning. And it's again, it's that thing that you said, not condonable, but it's understandable for someone of at his time and things like that. I think you did that so well. And having these little other characters like Bernard and Louise and things, like it was almost a balm in a way.
Yeah.
It was needed. And I think if you didn't have multi-diverse, like, multifaceted characters, and you didn't have these voices of reason throughout, I think it would just be nothing but an infuriating read.
Yeah.
And I don't think that is what is needed for this story.
Yeah, no, there needed to be some kindness in the book, and a few moments of lightness as well. I mean, the Domsel character is such a ridiculous guy that he brings a few moments of humor, and then also a few moments when Henry, because he's so awkward, it's so cringe, some of the things that he gets wrong, especially with women and in social events. And without wanting to make too many modern parallels, he sort of reminds me of, he's like a sort of 16th century incel, because he doesn't have a girlfriend and he does a lot of masturbating by himself while reading pornography that he's managed to collect. And so,
or just, the witch's hammer, whichever sand.
The Hammer of Witches is basically a pornographic. It's absolutely disgusting, that book. And it was the most read book after the Bible. And people, I mean, people believed it. And he managed to get hold of lots of these medieval manuscripts where bored monks would write in the margins, they would draw like dirty pictures. This is a whole thing, and I've collected so many of them. They're hilarious.
Do you have them up on like your wall and stuff? Like,
I do have a book that's called Medieval Obscenities, and it's absolutely filled with these funny pictures. I was a bit embarrassed to buy that from the shop, but it is.
It's research, I promise. It's for a friend.
It's research.
What's that? I don't know.
But that's where he got his sort of sexual gratification. So he built up in his mind an idea of what a relationship with a woman was, which is not. I mean, it's quite similar to the way that young men can become addicted to pornography now, which is not how sex is in real life. And so he was a bit of a 16th century incel, and he thought he was sort of allowed to pick a girlfriend and have one. And when he realized that life wasn't like that, he began to develop this resentment and bitterness that was harnessed by people like Calvin. So So
Yeah,
yeah,
a bit of a
he's a difficult guy. He's a difficult guy, and I understand why people wanted to throw their books against the wall.
But in like the best way though, like in the best way. Like I kind of because to be honest, I had this on my to be read pile before I'd even started the show. Like I really wanted to because I'd heard good things, and like so I'm friends with Sabrina Borman, who is another author of Cool and Crow, and she'd been talking a bit about it and stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll check that out. And then I saw her review on Goodreads, and I think she said something about wanting to hold the book. And then so when I'm reading this book, I'm laughing to myself because I'm like, damn it, she was right. Like I know exactly what she's. Yeah. I was just like, how fucking it be so? But like no, like when you're reading it, it's just like, oh my god, like it's just why? How can you say what you do? Like, but in the best way. Like it's absolutely what I want from a book like this. I want to feel all of those emotions. I mean, like, I mean, that's me as a reader. I mean, as a writer, what was that like writing? There were moments where I had to, I need a breather, like, like I need to just go make a coffee or, a gin. And like, were there moments like that with you as a writer, like where you were like, okay, like I need to just get out of my own head for a little bit, or like, oof, this was a really hard scene to write, I'm just going to go and watch like a comedy for an hour or something? Like, was anything like that?
I'm not sure. I think that I was in quite a dark place when I was writing it. I definitely went into a dark place to write it. And I think I was, spending quite solitary days at that time, just sort of writing. And I remember that at the end of it, I did have to remind myself that there are good people in the world. So yeah, living in his head with him for I wrote it quite quickly because I do, once I get into the writing stage, I write quickly. But I was in his head for about 3 months. And then when I had to go back and edit it, I was kind of, oh, I don't really want to see you again, Henry. I don't want to be you again. So yeah, it did. It was
like glaring at your husband, just like, ugh.
Yeah. Well, I did get a lot of, feminine rage out that I didn't even know I had. But I think it was necessary. So yeah, it was. It was a dark thing to write, and you do have to take yourself into that place to write it. But I don't want to say I enjoyed it, but it was a really profound experience for me to create that world, and it definitely deepened my relationship with Geneva. And then the book I wrote after that was also about Geneva. So yeah, it's wonderful to write about where I live. But yeah, I think all my books are going to be dark. I don't think I will ever write a rom-com.
I think if you did, it would be a very different type of book, like rom-com readers are used to. But no, like I think these books are needed 100%. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I do have a rom-com manuscript. I have several manuscripts that will never be published, and one of them is a rom-com. But it's very difficult to write. Well, firstly, to write romance, as you can see from Henry and Louise's fucked up relationship. But also to write comedy is very difficult, because it's very difficult to know whether you are actually funny. And the rom-com that I wrote was probably a little bit too close to home. So what I've done with that one is I've sort of mined it for material that I will use in other books. So yeah, I don't think I will ever be publishing a happy book, but that's okay.
That's all right. You have a brand, you stick to it. And if you ever did, though, I'd be very interested to know what that looks like. But yeah, I mean, like on sort of like looking at themes and darker themes, you mentioned that you've written something before. You had it was the Reprobation series, and that also it's modern day, if I'm right. And yes. I haven't read it, sorry, but it's yeah, but that also has a tie-in with like religion and like the occult and things like that. Is that something then, I don't need to know about like your like religion, if you have any, or anything like that, but like just, you know, those sorts of themes and those correlations, is that something that is, it seems quite important to you? And
definitely. And in fact, reprobation is it's partly about Calvinism. So I've obviously got a deep-seated obsession with Calvinism, even before I moved to Geneva. Yes, reprobation it's a crime fiction series, but it's
seems great, by the way. It's on my to be read, like my Goodreads to be read.
It's quite a fun series. It's really fun to write because it has a heavy metal theme. Because one of the main characters is a death metal guitarist, and I sort of came at it from the heavy metal angle because I was a metal journalist before. So it's,
you have a band, right?
Yes. So it was a really fun series to write, and the overarching theme that runs through the series is the difference between belief and truth, and what belief makes people do, and that's something that's always fascinated me because I grew up around religion. I went to a Church of England school where we sang hymns and prayed every day. My grandfather was a church warden, so I spent my childhood playing in a graveyard.
Oh, nice. I mean, respectful.
Oh, I love graveyards.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah, I love churches. I love religious music. I would love to believe, but I don't. And it's something that has always fascinated me. So yeah, all my books are about yeah, the difference between belief and truth and what people do based on their beliefs. Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. And I just have like a couple of quick questions left. We are going to sort of wrap up now, but if you could have a sit down with Henry, Mr. Aubert, Monsieur Aubert, what would you say to him? Like if you came at him, like, I won't say the end of the book, but maybe like in the middle of the book, what would you say to him?
Oh man.
Without fear of being called a witch.
I don't know. I think I would probably say the same as Bernard, maybe even less uncertain terms. But I think that there came a point where he was not going to see reason anymore because he had been swept up with the crowd, which does happen when people are busy scapegoating. I think he was just too far gone with his own selfish interests. So I don't think I would have been able to dissuade him. But I think I would have been. I'm nowhere near as virtuous as Louise, so I don't think I compare myself with Louise, but I definitely see some similarities with Bernard, and I might have taken the same tack as him. But I don't think I would like to meet Henry in real life. He's kind of an asshole, so.
I think I'd have just smacked him upside the head.
Yeah, probably.
Stupid. Go read something other than The Witch's Hammer, Jesus Christ. Yeah, no, fair play, and I think that's fair enough. It's probably a little bit more like I relate to Louise in a lot of ways, just her kind of like her mindset and things like that, but she has way more patience than I do, so cool. And then so lastly, if you could just for our viewers and listeners, depending on how they're tuning in, just summarize all the parts of the soul in say 3 words. How 3 words?
How about
some questions now?
A witch hunter struggles with his conscience. No, that's boring. How about a love story, a horror story, a true story? How about that?
Okay, nice, love it. That's excellent. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I mean, those are pretty much all my questions. As I say, you answered about 4 of them in the first answer, so I was like, but no, I'm only joking. But no, it's been really lovely to talk to you, and once again, just congratulations on the book. It's been really sensational reading it, and I'm definitely going to go check out the Reprobation series because I think it's just going to be. I mean, murder mystery intrigue stuff is always like dark secrets and things. Always gets me going. So I'm gonna check those out, and I'm so excited for your future projects. Oh my gosh, that's amazing! And you know, hopefully I can get you on for around those times, and you know, this show hasn't gone into the ground. And yeah, and I just, you know, if there's anything else that you want to promote, or if you want to let people know where to find you and find your works, I'm just gonna grab, I've got it propped up behind, oh, it's Grimm's Fairy Tales. I thought it was, oh no, there we are, the Divine Comedies down here. I thought it'd have been apt to have had Divine Comedy behind there, but no, you've got Grimm's Fairy Tales instead. But yeah, this is the book that you're looking for if you want to buy it, which I suggest you do. But yeah, if you want to let people know where to find you and your work, that would be lovely.
Or just to give a big shout out to everyone at Quill and Crow, to Cassandra and Stephen and Alma and the team, because they're just amazing for picking my book and doing such an incredible job with the editing and the marketing and the author support. It's just fab, best publishing house ever. And you can find us at the Crow Shop, where we sell loads of cool stuff as well as books, really incredible stuff for gifts and for treats. So check out the Crow Shop, and you can find me on Instagram. I'm kind of on Twitter and Facebook, but not so active. So Instagram is the place to find me. And I also have a really fun YouTube channel where I play heavy metal, piano, and guitar. So you can find me on Instagram and YouTube.
Oh, nice. You'll have to send me those links, and I'll share them around. But yeah, no worries. I'll put I have all like links and stuff in the blurb. Open it up, have a look, and yeah, or otherwise they'll be, you know, on the audio cast, like I'll put them in the blurb and stuff as well. So I know Quill and Crow stuff, but yeah, like your YouTube channel and stuff, you want to whack that over to me, I can get that done, and then everyone can go check you out and your awesome work. No, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much. This has been an absolute delight. Yeah,
that was really fun. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome.